Hey guys, welcome back to Honkai Star Rail. In today's video, we're going to discuss Topaz and Numby, my thoughts around them before they're released, based on all the official information we have on this character. Now, the first thing I want to mention is, before we go to anything, because we're going to go summarize the skills, talk about some gear sets and stuff like that, the pros and cons, some synergies, all that sort of stuff, which is on screen anyway, but I want to elaborate on all these things. But the first thing that I do want to mention is that I myself am pulling for Topaz and Numby. I wanted her over Jingliu, so I won't have Jingliu on my main, but I am hopefully going to win the 50-50 on Topaz and Numby, and that is just purely due to enjoyment. I just wanted to mention that I don't think she's going to feel as impactful when she drops in the game as something like Jingliu and Imbibra Lune, because she is a different style of character. We'll touch on that more in a minute, but I just wanted to get out of the way. I definitely think she's going to be good, and she's going to have definitely future value in my opinion, but I don't feel like she's just gonna like rock the meta like those two did, but we'll have to wait and see if she does. Anyway, let's go through the basics. So her skills, pretty much everything is just tied into her passive, explaining how she works. So she's got this proof of debt, which is a debuff she puts onto an enemy, which is going to increase the follow-up attack damage that the enemy takes. And if no proof of debt is active at the start of an ally turn, she will inflict it on a random enemy. And that's like her whole thing, this proof of debt. Now, Numby is also part of her passive, where he comes in and he's kind of like Jing Yuan's Lightning Lord, where he is on the turn gauge and he has his own turn order and attacks. Now, when he's going to attack the enemy that's under the proof of debt state. Now, when an ally lands a follow-up attack on a proof of debt enemy, Numby's action will be advanced forward. So that is her whole passive, sort of summarized into the way it works. You got Numby, you want to use follow attacks on the proof of debt target so that Numby can move forward faster, and so he will attack the proof of debt enemy. Now, her skill is going to basically be used to target the proof of debt state that you want to onto the enemy that you want it to be on. It's going to reapply it to the enemy that you target with her skill, and then she's going to chuck Numby and he's going to do an attack which is considered as a follow-up attack. Then for her ultimate, Numby's going to enter the Windfall Bonanza state, which is going to increase his damage dealt and his crit damage. And then when an ally attacks with any attack, being a skill, basic, or an ultimate, on the enemy with the proof of debt state, that is going to then boost Numby instead of only requiring follow-up attacks. And then after X amount of turns that Numby uses during this Windfall Bonanza state, it will be ended. So it's a pretty like long-winded way to describe the character, but you got Numby, and Numby's going to take a lot of turns and do a lot of damage. Just keep attacking with follow-up attacks to the target that's under proof of debt, and then Numby will attack faster and deal more damage on that target. Is the TLDR of it pretty much. But when we look at this, I really like this. I like the follow-up attack type of style. The reason I'm going for her myself over Jingliu is because I just really want the pig and the mech on the same team. I want Svarog and I want Numby on the same team. I think it's cool. It's something I enjoy. At the end of the day, the game is, yes, meta will always be a thing. There will be some strongest DPS, but I think going for teams that you enjoy is definitely a thing. Now, if you don't like any follow-up characters, it's going to be kind of tricky with her. Maybe she gets used as a hyper carry, but I feel like her main purpose is to be a sub DPS or a supportive DPS to follow-up attackers. So you can still pull for her and hope for, you know, maybe a future unit. But just know that I feel like her main reason for pulling for her is you like Topaz, you like Numby, and then you like some other follow-up attack unit that's going to benefit from her. But once again, we could have future units that will benefit. So the pros. She buffs follow-up attackers. So the three current ones, when we look over to the Synergies side, that I think of now, we do have more units with follow-up attacks. You can be sure that if I pull Topaz, I'm going to be testing her with QQ because I'm a QQ main, and that's what I do. Now, I don't think that's going to be a great synergy because QQ is very niche on the follow-ups, but anything with follow-up attacks is going to have some potential use with her. You look at things like Herder, Yang Qing has follow-ups. Like anything with a follow-up is basically going to have some sort of potential with her. However, I think the three big ones are going to be Clara, Jing Yuan, and also Himiko. Now, that's what she's going to buff. Now, we'll talk about more about those specific synergies in a second, but I think she's going to just buff follow-up attackers is a pretty easy to identify statement. Next is that she is a DPS slash support slash breaker. I think she's going to have a really good break potential with Numby being in the turn order, getting advanced by all these follow-up attacks, which once again, as we get future characters with more follow-up attacks, it's going to just help buff that Numby even further, getting more attacks and add to that break potential. But she will have DPS potential, she will have support because she's helping those follow-up attackers, and then she will have that break potential, which is really nice against fire weak enemies. And then the other pro that I've written down here is future viability with follow-up units. Now I mentioned this a couple times already, but at the moment, when we look at units, those three that I mentioned, Clara, Jingyuan, and Himiko are the main ones that we're looking at, that I'm personally looking at her being paired with. Now, Jingyuan is the only, like sort of exclusive unit. Clara is really good. Himiko has her viabilities and she is fire, which synergizes well with it. But if we look to the future, Jingyuan at the moment, only his Lightning Lord is considered the follow-up attack. If we get like a 5-star damage dealing unit where like they kind of operate like Topaz, where maybe their skill and ultimate are both considered follow-up attacks, then you get that really good synergy. The problem that I have at the moment with the three units that have the greatest synergy is you can't really amplify their rate of follow-up attacks too well. When we look at Jingyuan, his Lightning Lord is fixed. His Lightning Lord can only move as fast as it can based on the stacks that you give it. You can't like give Jingyuan extra turns to proc additional follow-up attacks to make that work. Clara, she relies on enemy attacks, so you can't speed up her rate of follow-up attacks to then boost Numby faster. And then Himiko requires enemies to be broken, and once she's done the breaks, you've then got to wait for the enemies to recover. So I think that's the big downfall for the current units that I see as being the main units to use with Topaz, is that you can't advance the rate at which they use their follow-up attacks. Now, yes, if we're using something like Yang Qing, you can do that, but his follow-up attack is RNG based, and he's not the greatest unit in my opinion. And you don't want to be using 200 units. I feel like it might be a bit clunky. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. And his main damage doesn't come from follow-up attack, so it's not the greatest cross synergy. So I think in the future, when we get a DPS unit, that you can then like hyper buff that character to do more follow-up attacks, which means they will have more damage boosting from the effects of the Proof of Debt, and then they will also boost Numby faster. I feel like that is going to be Topaz's real time to shine. Now, the other thing with future viability on follow-up attackers is supportive units and sustain units with follow-up attacks. At the moment, the only sustain unit that we have with a follow-up attack is going to be March. But, March is a bit clunky. Like, I can see maybe using March as a solo sustain with a Clara, putting the shield on the Clara, focusing in on Clara, then you get the extra follow-up attacks with March. But that's very niche, and that requires you not using March's freeze, because if the enemies are frozen, they won't be attacking, which means you won't be getting the follow-up attacks, and your enemies would have to be highly single target focused. But at the moment, March is the only real one. So if we get more support characters with follow-ups, like buffing type characters / debuffing type characters, or if we get sustain units with follow-ups, that will further amplify the effect. Because the problem is, at the moment, in a Topaz team, if you're bringing one of these three units that I'm talking about, anything with a follow-up, you still have two units that could potentially, in the future, have room for follow-up attacks in their kit to help buff Topaz, which I think is really cool. So once again, we don't know what they're going to bring in the future for this synergy, but I'm hoping that as the game goes on, just Topaz becomes better and better as we get more units, because they're pretty good at diversifying builds on characters, and I'm hoping that that is the kind of thing we get, but you can't 100% know that it will happen. Now, as we move on to the cons, the first one being single target. Now, we've seen with the destruction characters, destruction just feels like king at the moment. So hunt characters are in a funny spot where single target is perfectly fine for clearing any content. Let's face it. It's just when we look at trying to do, zero cycle, speed clears, all that stuff, and you got ads to kill, unless you can get Numby moving enough times where he can kill like 5 enemies in a wave before the cycle ends, then maybe you have potential for that, but we'll have to wait and see how that functions. But in general, being single target only is a little bit of a con. However, because she can be used as a sub DPS unit, it's not too bad, because you can cover the AoE with the other DPS unit that you're buffing. And when we look at Clara, Jingyuan, and Himiko, they all have that AoE potential, which is really nice that she can synergize with that. Now, The other one is, the other con that I've written down is that Numby's boost requires the proof of debt target to be hit. Now, currently with these 3 units that I'm looking at, they are all AoE units. And the big one for me is Clara, because Clara is a revenge unit. So her revenge, if she's not in her ultimate state where she does the cleave revenge, then she's only really going to get the boost for Numby when the specific target with proof of debt attacks her. Same when I spoke about March. Now, March is a bit copium, but like March won't proc the Numby advance forward on both of her revenges per turn, because it's only if the enemy with proof of debt attacks that she will then revenge, and then the other attack is going to come from another character who won't benefit that. So it's very unfortunate that you have to hit the proof of debt target to proc the boost for Numby. If it was just when an ally uses a follow-up attack, it would be fantastic, because then you could really tune in on it. But it is a bit of a con that it has to be the proof of debt target hit to gain the Numby boost. So those are my pros and cons. Now, I want to quickly touch on light cones and relics. Now, we don't know for sure exactly what is going to be the best, but we can assume that cruising in the Stellar Sea is going to be a good one. That's the Herder Shop light cone. It's always strong. You can get it to S5 pretty easily. So it's always a great option for free-to-play players, in my opinion. The other one is going to be swordplay. Now, the way it interacts and the way we've seen Numby's attacks work, how he does like the big multi-hits with it, he should stack swordplay really quick, and you should get max effect out of swordplay based on the way Numby's attacks work. So that is a really good one. And then we'll have to just see how it functions on her. But if you have high dupes of swordplay, that means if you're free to play, you could leave cruising in the Stellar Sea on one of your other hunt DPS and keep going. But you know, if you're only using the one hunt DPS, you can take your pick. Both are really solid options, in my opinion. Then we look to relics. I think the relic sets that are really going to shine are going to be Musketeer, the Rubber Ducky set, and the Fire set. Sorry, I don't know the names of these sets too well off the top of my head. So I call it the speed one's the Rubber Ducky, the fire one is the fire one. I feel like 2-piece combos with these are going to be fine. You know, speed, attack, fire damage, all valuable stats on her. So it's going to be fine for when we look at it. I think if you just have any sets of those farmed, you'll be able to make it work. Obviously, when we looked at 4 sets, things like the Rubber Ducky set aren't going to be the most viable. So you're not going to look at 4 sets, but you're going to look at the 2-piece broken on that. Musketeer could definitely have some viability in a 4 set. Same with the fire set, depending on how her interactions work. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but I think those are the main sets we're going to be looking at. As for the planet ornaments, I think Celsoto is going to be the clear choice, buffing that follow-up attack damage when her skill and Numby are both follow-up attacks. I think it's just a bit of a no-brainer that is going to be probably the best in slot. As for the other ones, we got Rutilant for the crit rate, and we got Space Sailing Station for the attack. Now, those I've got in there smaller because I don't think they're going to be as good, but if that's what you've been farming, then, you know, they're still going to give you some stats that are going to be nice for it. So that's the way I think she's going to pretty much be looking at. I feel like no matter what, you probably want to be building her as a DPS, even though she is a quote-unquote supportive character by buffing follow-up attack damage. Why not give her as much damage as possible in the team so that she is working as that secondary DPS? I don't see any other reason not to build her for straight damage at this stage. But when we talk about those 3 synergies that I mentioned again with Clara, Jingyuan, and Himiko, obviously I didn't put synergies with support units. Obviously we have Asta, who is a fire unit who's going to buff fire units as well. I think we got really good synergy with Asta, Topaz, and Himiko against fire weak enemies. Himiko gives you that AoE clearing capacity, and then you can nail in on that single target damage on the boss with Topaz. Really nice. Asta giving them both speed, giving them both attack buff. Really, really solid in general. And I think that's going to be a pretty good synergy. Now, Jingyuan with her is going to be nice. I think anyone who is a fan of Jingyuan is going to like anything that has a potential buff for him. I don't know how effective it will be compared to his other playstyles in his hyper carry, but I'm hoping it's going to be fairly reasonable for him, being able to amplify that Lightning Lord damage, which is where a massive chunk of his damage comes from. As for other supports in that team, I don't know who's going to be the best in that team at this stage. I still think Ting Yun will be nice. The one issue with Ting Yun is that she only can only buff one ally, so when you're using double DPS, she doesn't bring as much AoE buffing, whereas something like Asta is going to buff the attack and speed of both allies, whereas Ting Yun only does it for one. But if you're focusing more in on the fact of it's a lightning weak enemy and you're bringing Jing Yuan to get him to do as much damage as possible, then Ting Yun's still a good option. Obviously, we still have Bronya as a support as well, who is a crazy support. And then we have Clara as the final one that I'm talking about. Now, Clara, like I said at the start, is the reason I am pulling for Topaz. I want the pig and the mech in the same team. I can't help it. It's too cool. I love these two characters. I love anything with like a pet or a secondary or a mech. You know, I love that sort of stuff. So I am looking most forward to the Clara combo. I think Clara has really great synergy because when she is in her ultimate state, she will be doing the AoE on the Revengers. So hopefully she can proc, you know, 2 to 3, depending on the layout of the enemy, who has the proof of debt and stuff like that. If you've got a boss in the middle with proof of debt, and then you have your 2 enhanced Clara Revengers, maybe the 2 enemies on the either side of the boss move first, which means you get splash damage on the boss, you get splash damage on the boss, then the boss moves and attacks Clara directly, and then you get the revenge on the boss. There's 3 follow-up attacks in a row that have then just boosted Numby. I think there's a really good synergy to be had there. Also, the great thing about Clara is when we look at this team where we're trying to use a support, a main DPS of Clara, a sub DPS of Topaz, and then a sustain unit, you're pretty much running a solo sustain. But Clara is also your pseudo tank in that team, being that she can take the aggro, she has her own damage mitigations. So I think she works really well in just a general synergy with the character. But once again, we'll have to wait and see when she does release. Those are my beginning thoughts around Topaz. Once again, I am going to pull for her. I just think the character is too cool, but I definitely think she is one of those characters that will get better with time. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts. Are you going to be pulling for her? Do you think she has potential right now, or do you think her main potential is in the future? Keen to see what you guys have to say, but thanks for watching. Hope you have an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Cheers.